really only one. Okay, but what we can do is we can maybe just, yeah, you can open because it's close. All right, let's just say the bracha. Those of you who weren't here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan Torah. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to his people Israel, and to all the peoples through his son Yeshua the Messiah, our Lord. Amen. All right, so we've been dealing with the life of Peter. What we're doing is just trying to frame him so that we understand his experiences, where God found him, what he did through him, before we actually eventually get into the epistle. Right? Because what we see is that God uses those experiences to help them understand who they are and what they're called to be. Okay? He will draw on those experiences in the epistles, and he will say things that will give you a little bit of a wry smile if you understand what he had to go through to get him to that point. Okay? So just very quickly, I'm going to recap my notes. We'll not show too many pictures. He was one of the first called. He walked on water. He went to Caesarea Philippi and he got the answer right. Who do you say that I am? He was on the Mount of Transfiguration. He was one of the guys who set up the last or the Pesach dinner. He was supposed to be the one, as we understand, to do the washing of the feet. And he had a little interaction there with Messiah. He fell asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane. While he was sitting, when he was rudely awoken by Judas and everything else, he was the guy who tried to chop off a head and probably hit an ear of old Melchior, so otherwise known as Melech, the high priest servant. And this is basically where we are in our story right now. I want you to go with me to John 18. Look at that. Right, I'm going to reading from about verse 13 to 27. John 18, 13 to 27. And this is probably what Peter is most famous for. What is it? Yeah, his denials. Okay? So this poor guy, he does some really cool stuff and steps out of the boat and does some amazing things. And we get to this point and we get to see God really pressing in and testing Peter's heart a little bit. Okay? As he did with all the disciples, except shame poor Peter gets a front row seat. All right, where am I? Verse 13. Okay, so I'll read from verse 12. So the detachment of Roman soldiers and their captain, together with the temple guard of the Judeans, arrested Joshua, tied him up, took him first to Ananias or Anan, the father-in-law of Caiaphas or Caiaphas, who was the Kohen Hagadol, that faithful year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Judeans that it would be good for one man to die on behalf of the people. All right, let's stop there. According to Torah, God's instruction, when someone becomes the high priest, when are they released from that office? On death, right? And we get to see that. Who was our example of this? Who was the first high priest? Aaron, right. And when Aaron was told to get up on top of a mountain, he was told to take Eleazar with him, and then he was able to see this transference take place physically while God was doing something spiritually. And he dressed him. And then he died. And for the most part, we start to think, oh, that's pretty dramatic, don't we think? But I think as a parent, at that point of view, understanding Aaron, to be able to see his son take over that role, that God had kept his promise to Aaron that you and your sons forever will be. And he gets to see this man transformed from a normal man into a high priest. Okay? Isn't it interesting that when we see Yeshua transformed in Revelations, we see him as he really is. And he takes up that mantle. Okay? So we have two guys that kind of get alluded to through the Gospels, and they're both the high priest. One's Ananias and one's Caiaphas. How does that work? Click, click. Interactive. I speak, you speak, we all speak. It's rather fun. Very close. Both were appointed by Rome. Okay? But because the one didn't do it the way they wanted to do, well, we'll keep it in the family, and then Caiaphas, you take over, but Ananias, you will. And what we find out throughout history, there's actually this little split here, and we find out that because of this split, and then they go, no, Ananias should be the one in charge. But now Caiaphas is because of Rome. We actually find people in this time period aligning themselves with Ananias or aligning themselves with Caiaphas. Okay? Understand the high priest has a lot of authority and has a lot of power, even though they're under Roman rule. All right? You're important. Now, let me ask you something else. Were any of these two guys direct descendants of Aaron? No. All right? We actually found out that there was a split after the Maccabees, where they started to sell out the high priest, or they became high priest according to what they could do for Rome. And we see a couple of these guys that actually come in and they say, if you appoint me as high priest, well, I'm going to Romanize this place a little bit more, and I'll make sure taxes come in on time, and don't you worry about a thing. I will get them to help you. And Rome started to see how they could control the people through one religious figure. And it was just after the time, or just before the time of Messiah coming in flesh, hanging around with people, that high priestly lineage actually split. And now all of a sudden, it resembles the function, but doesn't align with any of the mitzvot given pertaining to the high priest. So now we're sitting with two high priests that are both sort of in power, and they both sort of reign for about 4 years, actually. Nothing like Torah. Anyway, we get shimmied between the two. So we go and have some discussions. Verse 15, Shimon Kepha and another Talmid followed Yeshua. The second Talmid was known to the Kohen Hagadol, and he went with Yeshua into the courtyard of the Kohen Hagadol, the high priest. But Peter, Kepha, stood outside the gate, by the gate. So the other Talmid, the one who went back out and on duty at the gate, then brought Kepha inside. So open courtyard, house, sort of a biggish window, you could see and hear what was going on, right? And who is the first person we find letting Peter in? Yeah, just a servant girl being brought in. The woman at the gate said to Kepha, aren't you another one of these men's Talmidim? He said, no, I am not. Now the slaves and the guards had lit the fire because it was cold, and they were standing around warming themselves. Kepha joined them and stood warming himself too. Then the Kohen Hagadol questioned Yeshua about his Talmidim and about what he taught. Yeshua answered, I have spoken quite openly to everyone. I have always taught where the Jews met together, and I have said nothing in secret. So why are you questioning me? Question the one who heard what I said to them. Look, they know what I said. At these words, one of the guards standing by slapped Yeshua in the face and said, this is how you talk to the Kohen Hagadol? Yeshua answered him, if I have said something wrong, state publicly what was wrong. Right? Why are you slapping me? What's going on here? There's no formal charge. There's no judges. There's no witnesses. He says, what did you teach? He says, well, I taught everywhere. Why don't you go interview the people that I spoke to? Surely you need witnesses to have this discussion with me. That gets him slapped. They know they're doing something wrong. This is not held in accordance with what God said. They are not acting like righteous judges. Okay? It says, so Anan said to him, still tied up to Caiaphas the Kohen Hagadol. So one high priest or the previous one gets hold of him and says, all right, I'll send him to the other one. It says, meanwhile, Shimon Kepha was standing and warming himself. They said to him, aren't you one of his Talmidim? He denied it. No, I am not. One of the slaves of the Kohen HaGadol, a relative of the man whose ear Kepha had cut off, said, didn't I see you in the grove of trees? So again, Kepha denied it, and instantly the rooster crowed. Now, what makes this so powerful? What is it about this moment that breaks Peter for a while? What did he say to Yeshua at Pesach?
He realized that he would deny him.
He said, you're going to deny me. He said, we'll follow you even unto death. You know, don't even think about it. We're there for you. Don't even. God comes and questions him, and they're like, gone. You know, sometimes we say things or we ask for things we're not ready for, right? How many of you have taken up the call of discipleship? Say, I want to be a disciple, I'll follow you. And he goes, okay, let's see. And then he starts to check your heart condition. So you say you want to keep Shabbat. How many of you realize that when you say those words, everything happens on a Sabbath? And everybody gets very grumpy when you don't keep it. Why don't you want to come to our party? Why can't you come to our bride? Why can't you do this? Why can't you come to work? And all of a sudden, all of these things start to pick up and start to push back and start the rest of it. But remember, if God said, I put you through the wilderness so that I would test your heart, don't think for a second that you as a Talmid are going to come up and think you've arrived. We have to be trained. We have to understand him. We have to walk accordingly. And he understood something amazing. I'll get you now, Uncle Grant. Is that Yeshua understood the cost. He understood the reason he was there. He understood what he needed to do. That the disciples, not really. What were they looking for? King. They were looking for a king. Well, they got one. But what was their king supposed to do? Yeah, deliver them from the Romans. Well, it gets to that point where they believe all the Gentiles will come up and they will bring them gold and all the rest of it. Today it even gets a little bit more perverted, and they say, don't worry, the Gentiles will come and serve you and make sure that you are well taken care of, and they are looking forward to that day. And unfortunately, through the midst of that hard-heartedness, they missed the Messiah and they missed the example. You see, to be a true king in this understanding of Yeshua, as you came to serve. He gives that example just before by washing the feet. He says, don't come and lord over anybody. Not the way the nations do it. That's the way the earth does it. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to show you God's heart from the very beginning. I want to lift you up. In fact, it goes in New Testament, doesn't it talk about marriage? That it's a man's job to lift up his family. That even though he's the head, his job is not to lord over everybody. It's not to force his authority. In fact, when it talks about submission, people get very, very nervous when we start discussing these things, because submission has become a naughty word in today's culture, because it's been perverted. Right? Submit means submit or die. It's about dictatorship. It's not about authority. But the actual Greek word means, tell me, Dan, what does it mean? Be accountable to one another. He said, submit to one another in love. So you have to submit to each other first. And then he says, wives, submit to your husbands. How many of you realize that submission is a gift? It's something a woman can trust and lovingly give her husband, because she understands that he's a godly man and he will do things God's way. And that's why she would want to submit. How many times have you seen people try to force people to submit? Doesn't work out all that well. And we missed the point completely. You see, when they came in, they were looking for this king like David, who will rule and reign and kick out all these pagans and take control, and the nations, the Gentiles, the Goyim, will serve. And now he's been arrested by said Goyim, and he's being questioned by said Goyim, and now what? Later he will be executed by said Goyim. And we miss it. We miss him completely. Because salvation in their mind was only for Jews. It was about how our Jewish Messiah was going to save us. And God said, no, no, I've chosen you to be a special nation. I've chosen you to be a kingdom of priests. But I have to redeem the world first. You're supposed to reflect me. Slow to anger, compassionate, full of grace, loving. You know, if someone asks you to take up their pack, it's not about you, it's about him. Take an extra mile and go spend some time with him. Maybe you whisper something to his ears. He might turn into the centurion who cries out on behalf of his servant. But he tests you. You say you won't deny me, I know your heart. You say you want this? Okay. Sometimes it takes a wilderness moment or two to show us who we really are, and that is a good thing. Why is that a good thing? Right. Because if you can deal with your own sin, if you can acknowledge you have sinned, then you can change. Are you going to do it by yourself? No. The whole point of it is admitting it for what it is, and then I go to Messiah or I go to Abba and I say, Abba, I don't want to be this guy. I don't want to be like this. I need you to change me. Help my unbelief. Help my stony heart. Help my rebellious nature. Help me not run when you call. Help me to be softer. Help me to stand up for what you think is right and not what I think is right. And when you pray those prayers, are you not renewing your mind? Are you not changing your heart? Are you not asking him to teach you and train you to become more like him because you see the things in him that you want? Peter has some fantastic moments, and at this point, he's just like, you know, he gets it right, he gets it wrong. He gets it right, he gets it wrong. And we stop and we look at it, and so many times I sit there and I look at my own life and I look at the people around me, and when we go, yeah, no, we've got it all figured out, yes? And then you run into a wall. And then you pick yourself up and you're a little bit more humbled, and then you go, okay, I'm not going to run so fast, be quite as arrogant as I was, and then you become more arrogant again and you run into a wall. Who does that sound like to you? Remember Joseph? I mean, Joseph was all about that coat, man. That coat told him he was going to be inheriting the firstborn blessing. That coat told him that he had daddy's love and he was lifted up above all of his older brothers. And he was the one who went out to go give the report. Don't worry, the flocks are being well taken care of by those people, and they should have them washed and taken care of, and in this point by 5 o'clock. Don't worry, we've taken good care of them. That's a good boy, Joseph. And the brothers are like, yeah, it's not good, just wait. You know, like when you're like 12 years old and you're talking to a 35-year-old. And I love the dreams. You see, God had an agenda. And God's not wrong. He said, Joseph, you're going to be lifted up. And he uses, what was in the first dream? Can anybody remember? Not the stars, the other one. It was the harvest, right? It was wheat. Why would he use that? Why would he use the grains as an image? Because of the famine that's coming. What did Joseph get? You're actually going to bow down to me, though. I told you I'm special. Check my coat. He missed the part about the famine completely. He wasn't worried about being here or giving food. He was worried that, I told you I'm special. He was right, but the heart was wrong. So what did Joseph ended up doing when he pulled his rank one too many times? What happened to him? He got flung in a hole and his coat got taken away. That thing that you thought made you special, my boy, it's lying in pieces here. Now who do you think you are? And God says, no, I've still got a plan for this guy. And he gets sold off and he ends up in Potiphar's house and he gets lifted up again to a place of authority. Same thing, he takes care of the entire household until Potiphar's wife thinks he's kind of pretty. And we know the story. She asks him to do something unkosher and he runs. Good boy. He doesn't stand around and negotiate. No, please, stop it, please. He ran. You know, playing hard to get doesn't work, no? He ran. He give you a format for sin. When it tries to grab hold of you, bolt. Don't let it. Don't let it entice you. Don't let it talk nonsense into your ears. Don't think you're strong enough to be able to stand in your spot and think it's okay. Understand when you're weak. Don't put yourself in that situation. And he ran. And he lost his coat. It's all about you, right? And then it's flung into another pit. This is fantastic. It says, I think you need to understand something. The reason you're alive is because God has chosen you. The reason you've been lifted up, because everybody else recognizes what you touch, God blesses. That is not about you, that's about Him. And he gets lifted up all the way to the right hand of Pharaoh. And he uses something that he understood. And this is kind of what I see in Peter's life. He used something that he understood. He has a dream. He has the cupbearer, or the cupbearer and the baker, right? You guys know you know about that being a prophetic idea. Okay, remember Yeshua? The cupbearer gets lifted up, right? Okay, he's going to be restored. Yeshua says, this is my blood. Where did the blood go? Nope. It was a picture of a cup, but where did it go? Think of an offering system. All the way to the throne room of God. He was going to be established next to the right hand of the power, just like the cupbearer was. But the bread, what happened to the baker? Yeah, his head one was lifted up and one was lifted off. So close, slight difference. And the bread represented what in that Pesach Seder? This is my body. Where did the body go? The body was broken, the body died. It's Yeshua. Why? Because he's going to be lifted up onto the right hand of the power. Why? Because there's a famine. Why? Because they need bread. Who's the bread of life? Not only for the nation, the seed of Yaakov, but for the nations that came up. It's Joseph. Oh no, but it's actually Messiah. And he understood something. But he had to be corrected, old Joseph, even though he had the dreams, that his father and his mother would come and bow down to him. And only later on in his life did he understand why. Peter, you're going to be used. But you need to be humbled first. Let me show you who you are now. That way, I can show you who you're going to be. When you look back in your life, you will realize it was God and God alone. Every time I think of Aaron, I think of the same picture. You know, goes out, Moses, there next to him, performs miracles with him, and he's out in the midst of it to the golden calf. And you think, how did we get there? And then God says, okay, Aaron, my high priest, you come once a year, and every time you do, you bring a bull. And that's going to make atonement for you and your household. I think every time he probably saw that bull, he probably thought back to that moment with that golden calf. But you know what really encouraged me? Is that it says there, it says, he gets all these instructions. And it says, and Aaron did everything that Adonai had ordered him to do. There was not one deviation after that moment. He saw the cost was high. Because of his mistake, 3,000 people died. On his watch, it never happened again. He would not be the cause of anybody's downfall. He would intercede. He would represent. He would stand up and say, it's about this Mishkan. It's about his grace. It's about his love. And it's about his plan for your life. And Peter's going through this moment where boldness and things fly out of our mouths. I remember once I was still fairly young in the Lord, and I said, you know, I'm getting the hang of this. I can hear God's voice, you know. And then he said, go talk to this person. They were having a conversation that they needed some correcting in. And I went, And that happened to me more than once. And he wouldn't leave me alone until eventually I had to go and talk to them. Even though it was a day later or 3 days later, God did not leave me until I got that message across. I was not so quick with my voice saying, I've got this all figured out. God's going to lift you up. He's going to use you. But sometimes if we want to jump the gun, he's going to really show us our own heart condition. And I believe that's what was happening with Peter here. It's always interesting with Peter. Most things happen in threes, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. I want you to go to Matthew 28 with me quickly. Oh, no, wait. No, don't go to Matthew 28. Sorry, my bad. John 20. We see this little verse that pops up. Hand me that picture of that garden too. All right, while Shawnee's getting us there, I'm going to read from verse 1. Yeah. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Miriam from Magdala went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she came running to Shimon, and the other Talmid, the one whom Yeshua loved, we understand it to be John, and said to him, they've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him. Then Kepha and the other Talmid started for the tomb. They both ran, but the other Talmid outran Kepha and reached the tomb first. Okay, well, John was probably a lot younger. Stooping down, he saw the linen burial sheets lying there, but did not go in. Then following him, Shimon Kepha arrived, entered the tomb, and saw that the burial sheets were lying there. You guys have any different translation there? The linen wrappings? Just that. Okay. Also the cloth that had been around his head, lying not with the sheets, but in a separate place, still folded up. Interesting. Kind of random side note, don't you think? All right. So this is a picture of a place we like to go to. It's called the Garden Tomb. Is there another picture of this? Nope. Back again? Nope. All right. So what we have here is we have what they believe is a slightly older style tomb. You see this little piece over here? That's where the rolling stone would come in. The door would be a lot lower, but there was an earthquake, hence we have this section that's been built up. We've got a little niche cut out. The common understanding then was, well, some archaeologists believe it was because of the smell. I don't believe it was that. I believe that they thought that the spirit would leave. And how long would the spirit hover around for? Normally 3 days. That's why the raising of Lazarus was so impossible. It was on the fourth day. Shouldn't have been able to do that. Okay, but you would have a stone. They didn't find the stone at this specific tomb, and it would roll over, and then they would mark it in place. Very big, very heavy, difficult to move. Can you guys see? Do I have to move this thing? Do I have to move it?
No, we can.
Okay. So what we have is, what's interesting about the narrative is that when you come up to this tomb, we know that it was cut out of stone. Okay, it was a rich man's tomb. You imagine chipping out this face and going in. It would cost a lot of money. What is also interesting is the layout. When you go in, you've got a couple of different chambers. And let's just do it like that. Doors over here. This is called the weeping chamber. Okay? So the area they would all come in and then they would cry over the body. On this side, this section is where they would lay the body while it was wrapped up in linen. And then they would close the tomb for how long, roughly? About a year. Okay? About a year. Once everything has been decayed, then we can come in and we can... And then we have another section over here where you can pack all your little ossuaries on the side and it becomes a family tomb. In some places, like when you look on the Mount of Olives, you actually have a stone sarcophagus about yay big. All right, and what they do is they have, as you open it, it's only about that deep, even though it's this high, and then they've got a stone slab. That's where they put the body and then they cover it over. Come back a year later, scoop all the bones up into a bone box, lift up the slab and put it underneath the slab and put it down. And that way we have family burial sites. Generation after generation after generation, or entire families buried in the same spot. What they found interesting about this place is this one was kind of interesting. It had a slight little incline over here for the person's head, and it had a little niche cut out over here where the feet were. So you kind of had a place to lie them in. And when you come in, according to the narrative, it was a low door. He peered in and looked across. And he would have seen where the body should have been, and they couldn't. Right? So it's quite low. I know you can't really see it, but I have to duck in when I get there, and then half of that door has been lifted. Okay? I can't tell you 100% for sure that is the place, but it is a really nice place to remember the story. So he went in and he would be able to see it. Now, what's with the clothes, the burial wrappings in one section and the cloth ovaries that would have covered the head in another section, all folded up neatly? Any ideas?
There's a tradition that Jewish people would, when they finish eating, the cloth put it down on the table once they're done, or put it down, and if they're going to return, they put it down folded. If it's crumpled up, they're still busy. Something like that.
Okay, close. Right? If it's crumpled up, thank you very much, I've had a wonderful time. If it's folded up, you won't see me again. No more death. This is a one-time deal. Okay? So as we understand it, he was saying, I visited the grave once, it's not going to happen again. It's done. Okay? So we see Peter, even after the denial, is still hunting for Messiah. Okay? He still wants to go and see what has happened. He's still part of the story. Judas, not so much, yes? Okay? Go to John 21. Now this is a big portion. Oh, look, it's already 2:30. Okay. Right. So we've got two things here, really, that we need to focus on. Number one is the call of Peter. All right? And I'm going to give you three different sections that are going to include John 21. And you're going to see, hopefully, that Peter was called 3 times. Kind of makes sense. Times you get called 3 times, except it happened in the beginning of his ministry. So I want you to mark down John 1, verse 35 to 42. Luke 5, verse 4. And John 21. Okay? So I'm going to quickly jump over to John. Okay, verse 35. Says, the next day Yochanan was teaching, this is John the Baptist, standing with 2 of his Talmidim, his disciples. On seeing Yeshua walking by, he said, look, God's Lamb. His 2 Talmidim heard him speaking and they followed Yeshua. So they're like, if that's the Lamb of God, we're going to go figure out what's going on over there. All right? Yeshua turned and saw them following him, and he asked them, what are you looking for? They said to him, Rabbi, where are you staying? He said to them, come and see. You can follow. So they went and saw where he was staying and remained with him for the rest of the day. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the two who had heard Yochanan and had followed Yeshua was Andrew, the brother of Shimon Kepha. So Andrew was seeming to be already interested in this whole idea of Mashiach, and he was busy hanging around with John a lot until he gets pointed to Messiah, and then he gets sent off. Okay? The first thing he did was to find his brother Shimon and tell him, we found the Mashiach. The word means anointed. He took him to Yeshua. Looking at him, Yeshua said, you are Shimon bar Yochanan. You are known as Kepha. So even here at his first meeting, he says, your name is Rock. And remember, we spoke about that at Banyas. On this rock, I will build my ecclesia, my gathering. Okay, my people. And we spoke about that in depth, right? So even from that point, he gets given him the name. If we go to Luke 5, I'll read from verse 1. One day as Yeshua was speaking on the shore of Lake Kinneret on the Galilee, with the people pressing in around him, in order to hear the word of God, he noticed 2 boats pulled up on the beach, left there by the fishermen who were cleaning their nets. He got into the boats and one belonging to Shimon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. He sat down and he taught the people from the boat. When he had finished, he said to Shimon, put out into nets, your nets down for a catch. And haven't. But if you say so, they did this, and they took in so many fish that the nets began to tear. So they motioned to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both nets to the point of sinking. When he saw this, Shimon Kepha fell at Yeshua's knees and said, get away from me, sir, because I'm a sinner. For astonishment had seized him and everyone with him at the catch of the fish that he had taken. And likewise, both Yaakov and Yochanan, Shimon's partners. Don't be frightened, Yeshua said to Shimon, from now on you'll be catching men. You'll be fishers of men. And as soon as they had beached their boats, they left everything behind and they followed him. So he has a run-in with him before, gives him a little clue, just like Joseph. And then he meets with him again, and Peter's just fishing, doing it again. He didn't leave his nets and run after him. He gets a second call, a second invitation, a second interaction. And then we go back to John 21. I've denied him 3 times. Now what happens? After this, Yeshua appeared. So after he was crucified, he resurrected. Yeshua appeared again to the Talmidim at the lake, Lake Tiberias. What were they doing at the lake? Fishing. Why were they fishing? All right, we've got 2 schools of thought here, so I'm going to give you both. Number 1, you go back to what you know. If you're Messiah in whom you pin your hopes of complete revolution and everything and understanding, and then you go, well, he's no longer here, so. But in the other Gospels, he says, I'll meet you in the Galilee. So maybe there was that seed planted that maybe if we go back to where he mentioned, if there is any hope, it might be there. Can't tell you for sure. Maybe it was a mixture between the different disciples in what they believed. Shimon Kepha and Thomas, Thomas means twin, by the way, were together with Nathanael from Cana in the Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other Talmidim. Shimon Kepha said, I'm going fishing. They said to him, we're coming with you. They went and got into the boat, but that night they didn't catch anything. However, just as the day was breaking, Yeshua stood on the shore. But the Talmidim didn't know it was he. He said to them, "You don't have any fish, do you?" "No." They answered him. He said to them, "Throw your net onto the right side, starboard, and you will catch some." So they threw in their net. Does that story sound familiar now? He was using an interaction he already did with Peter. And there were so many fish in it that they couldn't haul it aboard. The Talmud Joshua Love said to Peter, "It is the Lord." On hearing it, it was the Lord. Shimon Kipha threw on his coat. Okay, that's his outer garment, not like suntanning in spandex or anything, because he was stripped for work and plunged into the lake. But the other Talmudim followed in the boat, dragging the net full of fish. Okay, let's pause there. That's typical Peter. "It's the Lord." And he goes, "Yeah, put on the clothes and don't worry, you guys can, do all this thing." So he jumps in, but again, he runs towards God. He runs towards Yeshua. They were not far from shore, only about 100 yards. When they stepped ashore, they saw a fire burning, coals with the fish in it with some bread. Now, we just read about him sitting around a fire not too long ago, yes? What did he do at that fire? He denied him. Oh, okay, here we go. The stage has been set. Yeshua said to him, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." Shimon Kipha went up and he dragged the net ashore. It was full of fish, 153 of them. I'm going to get into that number as we close. But even with so many, the net wasn't torn. Yeshua said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the Talmidim dared to ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Yeshua came, took the bread, gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. This is now the third time Yeshua had appeared to the Talmidim after being raised from the dead. 3 times. After breakfast, Yeshua said to Shimon Kipha, "Shimon Bar Yochanan, do you love me more than these?" He said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I am your friend." Your translation, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." Right, okay, in the Greek, it goes like this. Love, there's 2 main words that they're using in this portion. You have agape, which is divine love, and then you have phileo, which is love like a brother. Okay? So, I'm going to break it down for you. He says, "Yochanan, you phileo me." No, sorry. "Do you agape me more than these?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I phileo you." That's why the translation says, "I'm your friend." He said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Shimon Bar Yochanan, do you agape me?" He replied, "Yes, Lord, you know I'm your friend. I phileo you." He said, "Shepherd my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Shimon Bar Yochanan, do you phileo me?" Shimon was hurt that he questioned him a third time. "Are you my friend?" And he says, "You know I'm your friend." Say to him, "Feed my sheep." Yes, indeed, I tell you that when you were younger, you put on your clothes. Let me pause there. Do you agape me? No, I love you like a brother. Do you love me like God? Agape. No, I love you like a brother. Do you love me like a brother? Of course I love you like a brother. Why do we have this interaction? Number one, the denials were 3 times. So he reaffirms it, not by going, "Well, that was tough. I told you weren't going to do it right. Yo, that was a doozy, buddy. I'm glad you're still here." You never beat him. He told him to check his heart. What is it about Peter that he doesn't understand yet? He only understands brotherly love. I will look after you. You will look after me. We will walk together. But do you understand the divine love of the Father that will lay down your life so that I can save you? Not once does he understand that agape is possible in his logic or in his heart. And I think that's what this portion is about. Will you be like me? Will you lay down your life? And that's what leads us into this next statement. Yes, indeed, I tell you that when you were younger, you put on your clothes and went where you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and carry you where you did not want to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Kepha would bring glory to God. Then Yeshua said to him, follow me. Peter, this is going to go. You truly are going to be a disciple after my own heart. You will, and we understand that to be church tradition tells us that he was crucified, yes? But even after all of the denying, even after all the issues, he still says, Lech achorai. Are you going to follow? I've shown you everything you need to do. How far does God have to go to look after his disciples or call his disciples? And he asked, not once, not twice, even when you get it massively wrong, he still finds a way to sit down around a fire. And when we have breakfast together, what does that tell you in a Hebraic understanding? Everything's okay. I can't be mad at you for denying me. I knew you were going to deny you. I knew you were going to do it. I told you. I'm not mad about that. But I do need you to understand that there is a heart condition that needs to change. Agape will only really come into play in Acts 2 because the Holy Spirit will come into Peter and he will be able to stand and do something so contrary to his normal nature. We'll discuss that as we go. So after this, in Matthew 28, it says they're in Jerusalem and they, Yeshua makes all the way up and he wants to talk to them about something. I'm going to read from verse 16. So the 11 Talmidim went to the hill in the Galilee where Yeshua had told them to go. Okay? When they saw him, they prostrated themselves before him, but some hesitated. Yeshua came and talked with him. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples from all nations into Talmidim, immersing them into the reality or into the name of the Father, the Son, and the Ruach HaKodesh. Teach them to obey everything that I have commanded you, even until the end of the age. They go to the Galilee, and then from there he takes them back down to Jerusalem, and then he ascends. That's a long walk. That's an hour by car. Makes me think of Banyas. He starts at the bottom. It's a 45-minute drive up that mountain, all the way there to ask him, who do you say that I am? He takes him to the place of disciple making, and he says, okay, now go and make your own disciples. But before he sent them out only to Israel, here he's saying, go and baptize even the nations. Teach them to obey everything that I've taught you. What did he teach? Torah. And he helped them understand the kingdom of heaven via parables. And they will be able to use this understanding and this right interpretation to get them to establish what God wanted the whole way through. And he says, you go make disciples. And once you finish making a disciple, they go and make disciples. And once they finish making disciples, you go and make more. How many years do you spend with a group of people making a Talmid? Okay, traditionally it was 7 years. The disciples probably only got 3.5. So, It is such a cliffhanger of a statement. He's saying to them, your training is done. Now you are like me. Now go and be me for them. Go and heal the sick. Go set captives free. Go tell them that God is on the throne. Teach them about Torah. Bring them into covenant. Baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. What does that mean? What is the word in the name? Shem. What does Shem mean? Authority or reputation. So as he comes out, you're saying God will fulfill what he needs to through you. And you walk that out as sons and daughters of the Most High because Yeshua was the Son of the Most High. And you have been born again, redeemed, bought with a price. And don't be about building your own kingdom, worry about building mine. A true Talmid follows their rabbi. And their rabbi's life is laid out. You see, study the Gospels to understand what he did, how he did it, why he did it. You study Torah to understand the Gospels. And when you get those two, you get the privilege of walking out. See, we have that if we know a lot about God up here, it becomes fantastic and we know all about him, and that's the point of it all. In a Jew's mindset, it doesn't matter how much you know, but if you live it, that will tell me if you believe it or if you truly know it. The highest form of worship. Not just obedience. Not just Shema. Study to learn to do. To live it. To become it. If the walking Torah came out and he said, if you study me, you will go be walking Torah for everybody else. You will set people free.
That's why Paul could say, copy me.
Follow me as I follow Christ. You see, the beautiful thing about this is we know he's the ultimate teacher. Right? That was part of the understanding when he says, call no man rabbi. Yeah? You guys remember that statement? And yet he was called rabbi. So it wasn't so much about making a statement of being called rabbi, it was really about understanding the authority. You are not in the house of Hillel, you are not in the house of Shammai, but you are in the house of God and about his kingdom, more nothing less. Man's authority means nothing. God's authority through man means something. It would mean very little if Moses came over here and stood his feet and we knew he was not with God, yes? But knowing that he was, that changes things. If a prophet or a teacher or an evangelist stands up knowing and in full power and authority called by God to do a work, it is as if God himself stands in your midst. So, what are you doing with that information? What do we do with it? Do we hold on to it? Do we study it to do it? I'm sure we've all met people that know a lot about God here, but they don't know him. I've met fantastic teachers that could teach on parables and bring like really insightful stuff, but they refuse to do any of it. That's not what this is about. Because the Great Commission that we've been given is to go out and make more disciples. And when he comes back, if you belong to him, you can be sure he's going to ask you, what did you do? How many Talmidim did you bring in? How many people did you? And I'm not talking about just bringing them through the and baptizing them and saying, now you're saved through Christ. I'm talking about training them up, teaching them, building them, being as involved as Yeshua was in their lives, you get to be in others. How many of you have realized that relationships are messy? And us as South Africans are really good at creating a really nice perimeter around us because we really don't want to get your mud on our walls. Well, you guys are going through marriage problems. Go see a therapist and let me know how it works out. You're having an issue with God. Oh, you don't know about your faith. Go talk to a pastor. Or the pastor just tells you, just believe. And then that's all he can say.
Well, he says, go pray about it.
Because that's what they've been taught. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be real. There is a different mold here. And I get to represent my Father. I get to be involved in people's lives. I get to walk with them when they're hurting, when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're frustrated. I get to hold them up when their legs are failing them because their faith is weak, but at that point is strong. I get to carry them to God. I get to lift them up. Isn't that what Yeshua did? Says, you're going to get this wrong, but don't worry, I'm here. We're going to get you right. And he's going to help us get there. We still got time? Don't let me forget about that 153, please. I'm going to jump down to verse 3. It says, after his death, he showed himself to them and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive during the period of 40 days. They saw him. He spoke with them about the kingdom of God. He helped them understand things that they misinterpreted. They thought that he was going to come to rule, and he says, no, this is about my heavenly kingdom, not some earthly one. This is about all creation, not just about Israel. But there's a point where I'm going to establish myself in Israel. And we see so much of that throughout the scriptures. At one of these gatherings, he instructed them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait for him and wait for what the Father promised, which you have heard about from me. Canaan used to immerse people with water, but in a few days you will be immersed with the Ruach HaKodesh. Remember, John said, someone comes on after me that will immerse you in the Ruach HaKodesh and fire. Now, some people we want to make that illustration because at the Shekhinah we see tongues of fire, so it's similar. I think maybe we should just stop and consider a little bit. When a disciple goes through a wilderness moment, it says in things like Isaiah, I've refined you. I refined you, maybe I've tested you, not as harsh as silver. You guys, what's the difference? What does fire do? Two things. Refines, purifies, or consumes. What is the difference between refining and burning, destroying? Yeah, it's the material that defines the process. The fire is still the same. So if you are covered by gold, by the righteousness of God, bought with the redemption of the blood of Yeshua, that is silver, the image that we have. The silver and gold perish when they get put in heat, when they get refined. But if you are all about yourself, all about acacia, all about wood, that's about you and your kingdom, when fire hits it, what happens? Understand the difference. When they were together, they asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore self-rule to Israel? He answered, you don't need to know the dates or the times. The Father has kept these under his authority. But you will receive power when the Ruach HaKodesh comes upon you. You will be my witnesses both in Jerusalem, in all of Yehudah and Shomran, indeed to the ends of the earth. That's such a powerful statement in the book of Acts because we know where they went. After saying this, he was taken up before their eyes. A cloud hid him from their sight, and they were staring into the sky after him. Suddenly they saw two men dressed in white standing next to them. That might have freaked out some people. The men said, "Why are you standing staring into space? This Yeshua who had been taken away from you into heaven will come back to you in just the same way as you saw him go into heaven." So there will be a time when he'll be coming on a. It actually gets reaffirmed in Daniel 7. Someone like the Son of Man, Ben Adam, will be coming on a cloud. Interesting. So he sees them ascend. And I included this because Peter really needed to understand this. Okay? All right, I got 5 minutes. I want to talk to you guys before we get into Acts 2. In John 21, Bruce, you have to keep quiet. There were how many fish? 153. Why not 145? Why not 12? What does 153 represent? Now, the normal answer is there were 153 nations. So, maybe? Huh? That's generally the first comment that most people shout out. Okay, so this is what we found. That, have you guys ever heard of gematria? Okay, gematria is basically the study of ancient language and numbers. Okay, goes something like this. A equals 1, the numerical value. Ba equals 2. Okay, I'm simplifying it, but you get the picture. So if I say, know your 3, let's say, if I say, you need to know your 6, I'm talking about my ABC. Make sense? Right. So I've got this number. What do I do with it? People have studied and speculated for a really long time. This is something we learned on the Sea of Galilee, which was really quite exciting. A Messianic Jew by the name of Daniel Carmel, he said, I've heard every explanation under the sun, but there was one that really touched me. And he says, when they broke it up, it came up to 2 Hebrew words. Ani. What does Ani mean? I. I am God. It's declared as a side note of. Why is that important? The God of all creation, the first time we read it. The first line in Hebrew. Bereshit bara Elohim. The very first statement, and he comes over here and in all of it, and he's talking about, why would I link these 2 events with something like that? Was it about denial? Did we deny the fact that he created everything? No? Come on, take a step. You're God, you've been resurrected. Ruach HaKodesh has resurrected you. You come out of the tomb, you meet with a bunch of guys who got completely confused and wrong, but you love them and you want to help them right, and you bring the side note in the midst of it. What is he doing?
Maybe it's not wrong, but in one sense, you could say that Peter and Luke go back to fishing and got all this fish, and then there was fish already prepared for them. So don't worry, I am God. I will take care of your needs.
That's a nice link. I'm your provider. Yeah? What else do you think? When man was created, what happened? How was dust and what raised Joshua? The Ruach. How did Joshua get into Miriam's tummy? And he just wants to keep on bringing you back to that same cycle. As I conquered death, as I'm dealing with things, we have this parallel between the first Adam, who disobeyed. Disobedience equals death. Death equals sin. And we have the second Adam. Why do I call him the second Adam? Why? The first time God breathed out Kriyam Adam, mankind. It doesn't mean man, Ish means man. But when God breathed again, a God-made person is Yeshua, right? When he breathed, it was there, same picture. Okay, slightly different incubator. Right? The second Adam obeys even unto death to give us life. To the point where the parallels get so, and the images get so strong, that he had to wear a crown of thorns. Why was that important? Right, because of the fall, earth gave thorns for the first time ever. All of creation was broken. Death came in. And yeah, he says, I'm going to conquer death. I'm going to take the curse. I'm going to take the thorns away. He's talking about recreation. Peter, what am I going to do for you? What is going to happen when that Ruach HaKodesh hits him? He's going to be so completely different that even unto death, he won't flinch. He won't run. And he will stand there declaring God's goodness, declaring Yeshua is Mashiach. You know, it was a really tough story, but a tradition nonetheless. I'll share it with you. I can't prove it to you saying that it's 100% true. But we know that Peter was married, and his wife was also taken, and she was also tortured in front of him. Now what they did was they had a steel chair, and they put coals underneath it, and they made it really nice and warm, and they had a special utensil to push you on this area, and then they would force you down into it. And you would sit on it, and hot things and skin don't go together, yes? And they would do it again, and again, and again, and they would scream, renounce Christ. Peter was witness. He was there. He was next. You know what, according to tradition, you know what he said? Remember Yeshua. Remember Yeshua. He couldn't even stand with him when he was being arrested. But he was able to be there with his wife. He said, if he conquered death, don't you worry. There is so much more to come, and there's such a bigger thing that's happening here. All of this will pass in an instant. It's about understanding that God is going to fix everything we broke. From here to everything else around us. Amen? All right. Guys, I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up. This week has been an interesting one. The last couple of weeks, I've been getting people talking to me about dreams. And I'm going to be sending out a voice note a little later on the group. If you're not on the group, just if I don't have your number, just come and give me your number. I'll send it to you separately, or I can add you onto the group. And the theme is simply this: Messiah is coming. Now that's popped up in a few interesting places, and this message goes out because God has sent it out. The person who received it asked Abba, and you'll hear it in the message, that I need to go and tell them. I need to go and tell them. And so this message is for us. This message is for people. And it was interesting that when we were sharing it with the relevant people that we spoke to, I mentioned another young guy's dream, when he also had a dream that he was sitting on a beach, and then all of a sudden a shofar blasted, and then some of us were there. And funny enough, another person had a dream like that probably, she said when she was a teenager, but that was probably like 5 or 6 years ago. Exactly the same thing, sitting on a beach, hearing a shofar go, seeing Messiah coming. Now, the reason I share this is because there's a bit of a side note to it. According to what, and you guys can go and test this, according to what Abba has stated in that dream, if it is from him, he's saying that people are playing, that we're not taking it seriously, that we're sitting in two positions. We come and we play church, we smile and we say we love you and we do this, we follow mitzvot just as long as people are watching, and as soon as they're out of earshot or sight, I do whatever I want. Here to tell you that God knows exactly where you are, knows exactly what you need, knows exactly how to change you, and he's giving you a loving call to say, you need to snap out of it. This stuff is real. You need to change. Now, I know it seems a little bit heavy, but remember when Israel was getting ready to do anything, he let the prophets know and he told them, go and tell the people so that they can get ready. This is not a message just for us. I think it's a message that's going out all over the place, that we need to understand that there is a point and a time. He knows the time, we know the season. Don't take this stuff lightly. We have to make a choice. We have to get busy, and we have to be about his kingdom. If you're still sitting on the fence thinking it's going to help you, and that no one knows that if you don't keep this mitzvah or that, and you're worrying about your parents, or you're worrying about me catching you out, or in the fact you just don't care, whether I know or whether other people don't. Let me lovingly just tell you, God cares and he sees. All I am trying to do is mimic Yeshua and get you to do the same. My job is to train people up. That's the commission. That's not my commission, that's our commission. And one day when you're ready, you will too have to go out and train people. Walking out in spirit and in truth, understanding it for who he is, not who we want him to be. Not with our perception or our agenda, but for the simple proof and the simple understanding of what's written here. To understand his heart.
Okay, I didn't know what this was going to say. I don't know anything about dreams, but while praise and worship was going on, I got make a declaration across the world. Messiah is coming. He's coming soon. Tell the bride to prepare herself.
Shoni said something with me this morning.
Wow, everything has just come in. I didn't even know that.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. So I don't get dreams as in, anyway. I woke up this morning sorry, let me just backtrack a little bit. To understand my dream, I need to explain something. So a while ago, I thought I was delusional, but I've been hearing a shofar continually in my sleep. And when I kept asking Father what this is about, he just kept giving me verses like Isaiah 6 and Joel 2, where we are to return to him. He's calling us to wake up. And this morning, I woke up from a dream that I had, which actually just confirmed what Vince and Mandy has just said, as well as many other things that Vince is going to share later. I woke up, and on one side of, I don't know what it was, on the one side of the line were people who are for God and who are serious about who God is. And it's people in our fellowship. And on the other side of the line were people who are not serious and who are not for God, as Vince has stated, who play face, who are
Pretending.
Pretending, as Yeshua called the people hypocrites. And I was very saddened by this, and I asked him why, and I got 1 John 2 from verse 3. We can be sure that we know him if we obey his commandments. If someone claims, I know God, but doesn't obey God's commandments, that person is a liar and is not living in the truth. But those who obey God's word truly show how completely they love him. That is how we know we are living in him. Those who say they live in God should live their lives as he showed it.
Amen.
And what I got from that was, but those who do not obey God's commandments. You might be saying, I love God. And Vince expanded on that. It's I don't know, God was just saying, do you know me? Do you really, truly know who I am? Do you know who you're serving? Because the time has come where we need to stop serving the world if you're serving God. We need to obey and follow his commandments. And one of the things now is if you were here for the earlier teaching, Shabbat is one of Abba's biggest commandments. And what do you do?
Thank you. You guys got anything else to add? Go and think about it. Go and analyze. Go and look at your life. Guys, God doesn't do these things to condemn. He does it to warn. He does it to lovingly bring you back. With every correction, there was always an opportunity to make teshuvah. And he loves you enough to say, if you're straying from the path, I see it and I need you back. I need you back because it's going to keep you safe. Please heed the words of your Creator. He's the one you're going to face. He's the one you're going to stand before, and he's going to ask you that which you know that you do. Some of us have been doing this for a long time. There's no excuse. It's a heart condition. All right? Tough, I know, but there's love in it. Prayer time is